safely. Have a great rest of your reunion weekend. Come back and see us whenever you can.
Conducer now. Thank you, sir.
Here you go, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah. 70 miles an hour. That means this year we are exactly 154 years old. No, this is not the original crew. Almost half of those people are dead. All right, I'm going to take that, but you know, if the laughs don't get any better, the jokes don't either. The Bank of California had no choice. They had to build this railroad because they simply had repossessed too many mines. Well, actually, they repossessed a lot of things. But because of the mines, they now had to come up with a way to get all of their ore down to the Carson River Canyon, because that's where they also owned the only hydraulic stamp mills. Sit, 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 sit. Please stay seated. That bank had such a financial stranglehold on everything going on here. They actually weren't liked by anybody, which makes total sense to me. If you're facing me right now, I'm pointing off to my left. We're going to call that side east. About 1,000 yards to the east over there, you see a great big pile of dirt. That's a dead giveaway that it's a very deep mine. By 1873, that was the deepest mine in the entire world. 3,265 feet deep. It was called the Combination because it was a joint venture for individual companies, and unfortunately they could not work together at all. So it became the biggest financial bust of the Comstock. I'll tell you something else interesting about the Combination mine. You're not going to believe this, but it's absolutely true. Every single day they pumped 1 million gallons of water out of the bottom of it. All of these mines had water in them like that. The Combination is also the first place that came up with steel safety cages. Prior to that, they would just cram all the miners into a big ore bucket, tell them to hang on for dear life, and then just start dropping them into the mine. Well, what on earth could go wrong with that? The steel building here to the east is the Comstock Gold Mill, the very last mill built up here. And in just a minute, we're going to go into that little wooden trestle. Now, this trestle was placed here because there were mines on both sides of the tracks. And this allowed those miners to push their little hand cars right over to the center of the tracks and then dump them down into the open cars of the V&T. Two superintendents working right here were John Mackey and James Fair. They went uptown and they very quietly began purchasing old abandoned mines all around the consolidated Virginia mine. And that's where 35 days later they would discover what everybody would start calling the Big Bonanza. They found a ledge of silver ore 40 feet thick. It set a world record, and it's never been broken. Well, at the time, silver had been assaying at roughly $8 a ton. Well, almost overnight the price skyrocketed to $1,200. Now, it wasn't specifically because of that discovery, but at that same instant, around the world, countries were quickly moving away from the Deutschmark, or the gold standard, and everybody was moving on to the silver train. John Mackey woke up one morning one of the wealthiest men in the world because of that. He and his three partners loved being called the Bonanza Kings, or the Silver Kings. You know what they didn't love? They didn't love the Bank of California. They hated them. Mackey sent two partners to San Francisco to start their own bank. It was called Bank of Nevada. And they had wild success early on. So much so that John Mackey brought them back here because he wanted to compete with the Bank of California. But because the Bank of Nevada was so much more ethical, everybody chose to deal with it. It didn't take long at all. Mackey and his bank became much more powerful than the Bank of California ever had been. I want you to take a good look at these three green coach cars here as we go by. They're now Hollywood famous, so I'm going to explain how that happened. And you might be able to look inside that steel building, which is our shop. You could see the very back end of the number 29 steam locomotive. Getting it fired up, so we use it tomorrow and Sunday. Right now we're passing a little hole in the ground. It's uncomfortably close to our tracks. That little hole is 1,800 feet deep. Sit. It is the Julia mine, named in honor of the internationally famous Julia Bulette. She, of course, was the very first and actually one of the few ladies of the evening up here. No pun intended. She was so well loved that at one point they actually made her the honorary battalion chief of the Warren Engine Company, probably the most famous firehouse uptown. Now there was one bad week where almost 100 miners got sick because of bad water. Julia took every one of them into her home and nursed them all back to health. Sadly, she met a very untimely demise. The little coward that did her in was caught 3 days later. All of her jewelry had been taken, all of her money was gone, but he did, for some reason, still have two of her elegant gowns. Well, they dragged him uptown, gave him a very fair trial. It took almost 8 minutes, and then they hung him by Piper's Opera House. They waited 6 weeks to actually have her funeral because dignitaries from all over the world heard the bad news, and they wanted to be able to have time to get back here to pay their final respects. Finally, as the little hearse made its way out of town, several hundred of the saddest looking miners you ever saw followed it. We just went through what used to be Tunnel 5. When the highway department built the truck route, they came through and dynamited the roof off, and they put in that little permanent steel crossing. The truck route is that highway you see all the way off to the east over there. That's Nevada State Route 341, and every year we close it for 3 days and we have a car race. The event is called the Virginia City Hill Climb. It's always very well attended by, it's usually even sponsored by, the Ferrari Car Club of North America. About 8 years ago. Yeah. Right here on both sides of our tracks we have two of our state trees. We have our pinyon pines and our mountain junipers. And we also have our state flower. Now this year, because of all the rain we've had, I think this is the most beautiful display of that state flower I've ever seen. The name of it is the Artemisia tridentata. Don't waste a lot of time trying to figure out where it is. It's just a real fancy word for sagebrush. That's our flower. The pinyon pines offered up the staple for both the Washoe and Paiute Indian diets in the form of pine nuts. Can anybody quickly tell me what we still make with pine nuts? Pesto, yeah. Why do we bother to harvest those juniper berries? What do we get? Gin. I love it when you guys do the homework. All right, now I'm going to try very hard to adequately describe what life was like for a miner. Ready? Horrible. Every mine of any depth at all had air temperatures of 140, and they all had that water. The water temperature could be 190 or higher. These were the world's best hard rock miners, but even they could only work for about 15 minutes, and then they kind of start to slump. If they were lucky, somebody would douse them with water, and then they'd go right back to work because at the end of the shift, they were going to get $4. $4 made them the highest paid miners in the world. $1 would pay for their room rent for a week. 75 cents got them a steak dinner like they could not imagine, and included dessert. 25 cents got them a gallon of Old Tub whiskey. That was part of the Jim Beam grind. 10 cents got them a fresh hot bath once a week. Now here's another thing that 10 cents would get them. There used to be a Wild West cure-all called laudanum. For a dime, you could get a little half-pint bottle of laudanum, and that consisted of 90% alcohol and 10% opium. Hey, Advil, take that. Boy, I don't know where it is today, but wouldn't it be nice just every once in a while to have a little bit of laudanum? You know. We're going to go through our second tunnel of the day. This is actually our first real tunnel. This is tunnel number 4. That's not confusing. Look at the walls of this tunnel as we start to go through it. Yeah, that's some of our typical Nevada soft loam soil. This tunnel is 417 feet long. When they were digging it, they had no explosives, so this all had to be done by hand. And in spite of that, it was completed in what everybody said was a record time. But somehow, they were able to average 18 inches a day. Our longest tunnel, 2 years ago, we discovered this had become a home of a mom, Bob, and 2 cars. We're still in there. Right here running alongside us, you'll see a little dirt road. That's part of the original wagon tow road up to Virginia City. That's how the freight wagons and stagecoaches used to come and go. Wednesday afternoon, that was a raging muddy river. We had a downpour like I haven't seen in years right here. For the 3 o'clock train, as a matter of fact. In just a minute, we're going to go past what's left of Tunnel 3. We'll never go through it. You'll see why. It was a nightmare for the original B&T. They used to run trains right down to the very entrance, and then they would stop, and the crews would jump out, run in the tunnel, and quickly start shoveling out anything that had fallen. And they had to do the exact same thing at the other end on the return. Keep in mind, the B&T used to run 50 trains a day, every day. That's a lot of shovel work. That's why the crews would always get real excited when they would see maybe 1 or 2 passenger cars in their train, because they would very gladly welcome you guys to go in and help clear the tracks. Pretty sure I would have passed. Right there is what's left of Tunnel 3, and you can see that it still caves in a little bit more every year. So we're now on a permanent shoe fly, or as we call it, the $1 million curve. But the good news is this little shoe fly does let us work our way down into Gold Canyon, and there's still some prominent buildings you're going to see down there. The first one you're going to notice is the long sloping steel roof of the Crown Point Mill, and it is sitting beneath the Crown Point mine. You know, early on this whole area was called Crown Point because of that. Here's how they came up with it. If you look way over to the west, right at the very top of the mountain, you see a big rocky outcropping. They used to think that when the sun hit that just right, it kind of looked like a crown, so that's how they came up with the name. The Gold Hill Hotel and Saloon down there is one of the finest of the West, and it was the longest in continuous operation in the state of Nevada. Please stay seated for me, okay? No more moving. The last famous building, the one with the red brick facade, is where the Bank of California used to be. I wish you could have seen the vault. Within 3 months of completion of their railroad here, the boys of the bank enjoyed a profit of $400,000 every month. Now in today's money, that would be almost $78 million. That is a prosperous little shortline railroad.
Okay, great.
If we had $78 million, I would try and fill the gas tanks of everybody on this train. I try. As we go by, take a look at this little bell hanging in the tower here. Used to hang above the Liberty Firehouse. I'm going to have a trick question for you in just a minute. All right, does anybody want to try and guess what happened to the Liberty Firehouse? It did not burn down. I told you it was a trick question. One day, high wind just blew it over, and all we have left is that stupid bell. Here's the trees and bushes. I give it about 2 more weeks, then they'll be slapping you as we go by. And I got to tell you, every once in a while, I get a little kick out of that. Right up there over your shoulders are where the very first major gold discoveries were made, way back in 1863. That's how this whole area finally became known as Gold Hill. You know, while those miners were desperately searching for that gold, they kept working around that thick blue muck. It was a mess, got all over everything, actually destroyed their tools. They just kept shoveling it out of their way, and then they noticed that when it dried out, it became as solid as concrete. So they started taking it uptown, and they were filling in potholes in the streets. Then one day, some much more experienced Mexican miners came through here, and they looked at that muck that was being thrown away, and I'm sure they all started to giggle a little bit. And one of them pointed to it and said, "Mucha plata," which I'm pretty sure translated to, "Hey morons, why are you throwing away all that valuable silver ore?" What do you think happened late that night? Potholes began to reappear, right? All right, we're going to stop here, and as soon as I get past you, you can all stand up if you want. You can switch sides, switch cars, switch shirts. I don't care. We'll be here just a minute, and I will. We had 2 horrific forest fires. We had a big fire in Tahoe. I honestly didn't think they were ever going to get that under control. And at the exact same time, that church was sitting right over there. At the exact same time, right over here to the west, we had the Lake Almanor fire. I don't know about you guys. I had no clue that lakes were that flammable, but it was so smoky here, you couldn't see the hotel Sunday. We just kept watching the air quality index deteriorate. One day it got as high as 490. I think that's about what they're enjoying now in Chicago. About that much snow. In just a minute, you're going to feel the newest remo in this little adventure. That little shimmy is compliments of an earthquake began last August with little tiny peaks of wonder. By 1948, the B&T was no longer profitable, so it started to sell off everything. They sold that depot to Story County for $1. It's got a busy remodel. Just a minute, right there, directly in front of us, you see a great big hole. It's all covered in soot. It's going to come up very, very close to the west side of the car strip. That is proof that steam locomotives did go through Tunnel 3. This is the other end of Tunnel 3. No self-respecting diesel would have left a mess like that. The diesel we're using this morning is our D3. She was built in 1950. She's a very proud retired member of the United States Marine Corps, hoorah. She was a switch engine to the Corps all over the Southwest. A couple of weeks ago on a Monday morning, my first train out, I had 81 retired Marines, both men and women. You should have heard the hoorah. That's pretty incredible. famous locomotive has to be that number 29 steam locomotive. And not long ago, we sent her to Pawhuska, Oklahoma, along with those 3 green coach cars. They were going to star, well, they do star, in a Martin Scorsese movie. It's called Killers of the Flower Moon. It is slated to debut in theaters in October. People with Apple TV tell me they can stream it already. I know you can see trailers for the movie on YouTube. I'll tell you something else. The morning those cars left here, they were not that color. They were just like this, emerald green, pixel yellow. Hollywood paid dearly to make them that Coleman green. I hate it, my boss loves it. A couple of movie stars you'll recognize are in that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. It's all about the story of the Osage Indians of Tulsa. Everything they went through after discovering oil on their tribal land. Things can be great. We're scheduling special trains around October just to celebrate that. We have a lot of fun with this tunnel. For our holiday trains, we put more neon lighting in it than you would possibly get to leave. That's the only thing that scares those bobcats out for about 2 to 3 years. So apparently none of those giant tunnel spiders fell into that open part of it. All the way across the ravine to the east over there, you see a big pile of gray tailings. That's the Foreman mine. They ceased operations way back in 1941, just prior to the war. That's the one they're trying to reopen. Now down behind it, which you cannot see, is where the famous Occidental mine is located, and it had, without a doubt, the highest grade or purest ore of all of these Comstock mines. My personal favorite mine is right up here at the end of the ravine. And it was named in honor of a very famous stage actress back in the day. Her name was Julia Ward, so they called this the Ward Bullion Mine. Totally ridiculous. Because they dug it for 3 solid years, went down 1,700 feet, never found 1 ounce of valuable ore, much less bullion. The only reason they kept digging is it's the only way they could keep selling totally worthless mining stock. Everybody did. It's the most popular con game out there. It got so bad, the state of Nevada finally had to step up and begin passing some of the strictest mining laws of the entire nation. And they should have. These guys are all a bunch of crooks. Right there where you see the big piles of dirt, that's the Ward mine. And what looks like a rock wall is actually the foundation for the head crane, or hoisting. Early last summer, some of the friendliest people I've ever met came up here, and they built those corrals, and then they went back down to southern Nevada around Bailey, rounded up a few of the wild furrows and brought them up here. And then a little bit later they brought in the 2 donkeys. Man, I hope you can see those donkeys. They have a jack and a jenny, and the jack stud donkey is 17 hands long. That's a big old donkey. You can't really get it. If one of the people were standing there beside him, you'd see just how huge he is. Every once in a while they bring him out here on the right-of-way, and they walk him up and down. They're getting him acclimated. They're going to try and offer wagon rides using the 2 donkeys. I don't know where those people are. They normally stop whatever they're doing and wave at us 14 times a day. Now once we get out of this tunnel, or what's left of it, over here on the west side of the tracks, a little ways up Sun Mountain, you're going to see a huge Victorian-style building. Now it's two-tone. They just recently completed painting it again. It's the 4th Ward School, one of the finest of the West. The very first one, this side of the Mississippi, to have indoor plumbing too. Way out there ahead of the locomotive is that beautiful Catholic church, St. Mary's of the Mountains. Played a very important role in the history of Virginia City. Back in October of 1875, they had what everybody up here called the Great Fire. It started early one morning, way out on the north end of town. Very quickly, high winds had it blow in this direction. Just before it got to the church, the city fathers and the bankers and of course the mine owners came running out and they begged the Bishop Patrick Minogue to use that church as a fire break. And he said, okay, but you have to promise to rebuild. And they did. Of the 30,000 people living here, almost 10,000 were immediately homeless because of that fire. But because of all the wealth that was up here, by that I mean there were actually more millionaires living here than any city in the world, 195. But because of that, in 1 year, everything was completely rebuilt and restored, including that church. They want you to know you're all invited in to enjoy the beauty of it. They don't care what your religious beliefs are at all. If you need more incentive, they sell wine in the basement. You can tell it's pretty good wine. Up here on the hill above us, you're going to see a big white sign that says Caller Mine Store. It's a great tour to take. It's a horizontal mine, so it's nice and cool in there in the summer. It also goes back in 400 feet. 300 years ago, when I was in college, I used to bring busloads of kids up here. At that time, they would go back 1,000 feet, which is 995 feet farther than I ever had to go. It's just not my thing. Just a second right there to the east, you can see a great big fenced arena. That is where, once again, we're going to have our famous cavalry. Alright, we get it. You don't own camels. We'll bring the camels. You guys have to bring your zebras, your llamas, and your ostriches. And the only thing neither one of us has to worry about bringing, because we always end up with too many of these, that would be jackasses. It has to do with all that beer they start serving around 7 a.m. We've got too many little kids, so I'm going to have to really clean up my favorite story from last summer. As we go by, take a good look at that yellow storefront. Right around the corner there's the saloon. That's where it happened. About 300 of his closest biker buddies. They parked Harleys all over the place. Dave brought in 2 live bands. And then Dave brought in some live entertainment. That's where I got to stop. I will tell you, we have never gone by that area as slowly as we did that day. By the way, his birthday is the 3rd week of July, so we'll see you then. Right up here above us, you're going to see the back of the Mackey Mansion. It's a beautiful home. It was the very height of opulence back in the day. John Mackey's wife, Marie, had the horrible, horrible job of having to travel all over the world and buy whatever she wanted to bring back and furnish that mansion. She brought back things people had never even heard of, much less seen. Well, this second trip is almost over. You guys have been an awful lot of fun. We always appreciate that. We also want you to know we never lose sight of the fact that without your generosity and support, we couldn't do this. And because of you and people like you, this is now our 47th consecutive year. Thank you very much. You guys please travel safely. Have a great rest of your weekend. Come back and see us again.